Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Union Arena Deck Tech. Today, we're sitting down with
Izarzin from Big Beard Pirates TCG.
And this time, we're talking about one of the most flexible and combo-heavy decks in SAO, if not in America right now, Blue Switch, also known as the Kirito Asuna Deck, also known as Why Am I Dying on Turn 3? This deck is known for its ability to push multiple attacks in a single turn, reposition its board, and apply pressure in a very calculated way. Whether you're new to Union Arena or want to learn the backbone of this very popular and very good SAO build, this one is for you. Now, let's start with the basics. How would you describe the identity of Blue Switch? Is it more of a combo deck, an aggro deck, or does it flex between roles?
I would say that the identity of Blue Switch is very much a combo deck. Although it has aspects of an aggro deck, it's mainly trying to get a multitude of attacks through compared to trying to get, a few bodies out.
All right. And when you sit down with this deck, what role are you expecting to play in most of your matchups?
The role I expect to play in most of my matchups is to always have that constant pressure and be able to set up multiple attacks. Every blocker they have, I'm always getting one more attack than what blocker they have.
And what are the key elements that make this deck stand out from the other SAO builds that we've talked about on this channel already?
I think obviously from, the switch mentality, there is a lot of manipulating your energy line and your front line. And I think that's the most key, important aspect to this deck.
Now, we've got your deck laid out from your zero cost to the top end. How would you describe the deck's cost curve overall?
I think because every zero cost up to the 5 cost is useful, you're able to get out a very, a solid base, which is a 12-0 cost, 4 1 cost, and 6 2 cost aspect, which is the most stable operation.
Okay, now which part of the curve, early, mid, or late, is the most important for this Blue Switch deck to function properly? What is it that this deck does not really do its thing if you don't see these cards in the early stages of the game?
I think the most important part of the curve is obviously early game, because honestly, this deck is trying to get you out of the way by turn 3 or 4. So, being able to get your double energy generators and your raids early is very effective, but, you also need to get that zero cost so, you can actually progress through the first 2 turns.
All right. And what's a typical turn 2, turn 4 game plan when you're looking to build this type of deck so that you can line up those bigger swings later on?
I think the most important part of the turns, the early turns, is getting your 2 energy generators. So specifically the way I built it, I have a 2 cost Kirito, which is, a staple in some decks, which is whenever it becomes active, it generates 2 energy. And we also have the 3 cost color trigger, which is also a very important aspect of this deck, which when played, you can choose up to 1 character on 1 line and you can move it to the other.
Yeah, so that is the beginning of this entire switch style strategy. So let's talk about how the deck functions internally. Can you walk us through how the Kirito Asuna interaction really happens? What is the specific mechanic at play?
I think this is very much like in the anime, he has 2 swords, and I would say the starting sword is the Kirito. You want the Kirito to be able to enable the Asuna to get those multiple attacks in, right? Mm-hmm. So we have this Kirito right here, which is the 4 cost from the starter that is able to, switch positions of 2 characters on either line, and it gains double attack, which is that pressure that you want early. And then we have the other 5 cost, which has synergy with the Asuna, and it also has an activate main, which is able to manipulate, the lines and get you that effective attacks with the Asunas.
Okay, now when you are utilizing this, you're seeking to have your Asunas where and your Kiritos where so that you can properly execute this strategy.
Yeah, so mainly you want the Kiritos to be in the front line. So, specifically, the 4 cost raids or the 5 cost raid, you're wanting that to be at the front line, and then you want the Asuna to be in the energy line so that whenever you are switching, you're gaining the certain benefits that those Asunas get. Like, for example, the 2 cost, whenever it moves to another line when it's not the movement phase, it gains plus 1000, so it becomes an effective 4K blocker. And for the 5 cost raid specifically, the Kirito, you do need the Asuna and the energy line to be able to switch with them during your attack phase.
Wonderful. Now, walk me through from the beginning of the deck up to this larger curve. What does each of these cards play as a role inside of this deck?
So for the 0 cost, we do have 2 raid targets. So we have the Asuna 0 cost and the Kirito 0 cost. Like I said, they are raid targets, and also they have good triggers, which you like. And the 2000 BP line is very good with the Asuna, because that usually is able to trump many of the things that are trying to defend turn 2. And then my personal pick, I use the Sakuya. I do see a lot of people using the Yui because it does, when played, it does draw a card and then put 1 card from the sideline. But I believe personally that in this deck, you kind of want that effective 2k BP over filtering, because essentially filtering is not, adding any cards to your hand. So you're not really, applying more bodies on board.
Okay, and then moving on to your 1 cost.
Yeah. So the 1 cost, that 2k stat line that I was talking about is pretty good early on. And it's also our searcher in the deck, which it searches for anything that's Aincrad, the top 3, and you try something after. And Aincrad, like 90% of the deck is Aincrad. There's only a few key pieces that aren't Aincrad, but they're usually not the most important thing to find. The most important thing to find are obviously your raids.
All right. Then moving right along, we have a card that we already mentioned, both of them actually.
Yeah. As I was saying before, the 2 cost Kirito, it is ALO, so it's one of the non-searchable cards in this deck, but it's usually more of a equivalency of the 3 costs whenever you're forced to go first, because in this deck you kind of want to go second anyways. But if you are forced to go first, this is a card that you do want to mulligan for. And the next card is obviously an Asuna. So that's the ratios for this deck. Asuna is a very important aspect of this deck, so people usually like to maximize the amount of Asunas they have. So I would say this is a pretty contentious ratio, which is 2. But I feel the most comfortable with this ratio because I'm trying to maximize my higher end as well. Okay. But it is a very strong card where whenever you do move it outside of the movement phase, it does become a 4K body. And a 4K attacker is obviously the standard for this game.
Yes, if it's not a 4K, it has to have some other line of text that makes it tremendous. Speaking of cards that are tremendous, though they're not 4Ks, that little Yui I see you playing in here, I like that tech.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my 3 costs that I use. I'll say that not too many people use it, but I think it's a very important aspect and very key compared to what other people would probably use, which is the Lisbeth. And Lisbeth, like I said before, with the Yui that people use, it's just filtering. And in my opinion, filtering isn't what you want in this deck. It's any body can be effective as long as you're attacking more than the amount of blockers they have, right?
Yes.
So what this Yui does, and it's able to cheat out a body that's a blue 2 cost or less. So anything down here, you can search with your 1 cost. You can generate energy. You can have out an Asuna or a raid target. And basically, the more amount of bodies you have, the better the deck runs. And in situations where you're not seeing the bodies or you're very low in hand, which this deck, it does get low in hand pretty quick, you can search the top 2 for any character card. So that's very useful to finding your key piece for the next turn.
Oh, absolutely. Then moving along, I think this card may actually be the MVP of this deck secretly, that Color Trigger Kirito.
Yeah, absolutely. The Color Trigger Kirito, it greases the wheels of this deck. It's very necessary if you're going second. It provides you the most amount of pressure on your second turn, being able to push up, one of these 2K bodies ideally. And the fact that, it's a Kirito, a raid target, amazing. The blue color trigger, probably like top 3 in color triggers. And the fact that even, let's say you pushed up one of these, 2 energy generators, you can actually push it back using this effect. So yeah, very generous.
Very nice. And then moving right along, we kind of skipped over these cards, but they really do shine and allow you to finish off the game. Your Asunas.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Asuna is a very important name in this deck. And one of the ones that can immediately attack, considering it's the raid, which is this Asuna. So whenever there's a Kirito on your field, it does gain impact 1, so that's one of your finishers. And then during your turn, using that switch effect, whenever this moves outside of the movement phase, and specifically outside of the movement phase, meaning if you raid from your energy line, that does count as moving outside of movement phase. You do gain when attacking, draw a card for the turn, which, like I said, this deck does run low on cards, so it's very effective in regaining that advantage.
And just so we're clear on this, he's a judge. Izarzin, you're a judge, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So all of your friends that might argue with you that that's not switching lines, he knows he's correct. I had somebody try arguing with me in a game. I was like, no, that's movement. All right. And moving right along to the next Asuna.
Yeah. I think this is one of your cards that is it's a 4K body. We love 4K bodies, right? But it's one of those cards that when you're playing against these, we're kind of seeing that green going strong nowadays. We have like the GGO, Sinon, and we have that Kirito that's 5K, and then we have Lancelot. They also have 5K bodies. This card, whenever you move outside of the movement phase, it gains plus 1,000 and impact 1, which means you're able to trump those cards and get in effective damage.
Yeah, the card is fantastic. And we've already kind of touched on the 2 Kiritos. They are meant to be more enablers for your Asunas. There, any other card, I believe they can switch with any card, correct?
So this Kirito right here can switch 2 cards from different lines. But this Kirito does need an Asuna to be in the energy line to be able to switch the 5 cost.
Okay, fantastic. So looking at everything we have, what is your ideal turn sequence when you feel like you're most likely to begin winning the game?
Very much key cards are, I would say, an Asuna. Asuna, very important name. It also enables this to have double attack. If you want a search, that's also ideal. And like I said before, any 2 cost generators give you a very efficient value in your energy line, so you're able to push up different bodies out instead of having to keep 4 bodies for 4 energy. So I would say those are key cards. And then in the early game, I really want to see this 4 cost Kirito compared to the 5 cost, because it's it's very much direct value, double attack. And even if they clear it the turn later, it's a 4K beat stick. So I don't feel like I've lost as much value than if they kill this 5 cost Kirito.
So you utilize him more to bait out any potential removal from your opponent.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, how do you adjust your early game based on whether you're playing against a control, an aggro, or a mid-range deck?
Yeah, absolutely. This deck, very clearly, it can fall down to anything that has like double block, right? That's a very effective keyword. So most of the time, I do want to increase the amount of bodies on board as fast as possible, which is why I have the Yui in the deck. But if there are cards like, double blockers, like let's say I'm playing against, Green Saitama or maybe a Metal Bat, that, they have that 4 cost Genos as double block. Maybe I want to actually, use my special instead of putting out another body, because that will increase, the chances that I can effectively attack, the later turns, right? Because he's not able to, chump the 2K bodies or the 3K bodies.
Okay. And is there any extra gameplay if there's a real aggro deck that you're up against?
No, I think the thing is against aggro, it's just whoever finds their pieces first, right? And I guess a key card, like I always reiterate, is this Yui. The fact that this Yui can cheat out another body just puts me ahead very much,
Yeah, it's like getting a free action. It's a small action, but it's still an action. All right. Now, what are some cards in this deck that you have laid out here that you consider flex spots based off of meta and preference? And what are a couple of other cards you think that people could throw in if they're, feeling like they want to play something a little different than what you have here?
Yeah, something I didn't touch on was this deck is very much hinged into I'm trying to, end the game by like turn 3 or 4. So if you haven't noticed, the final is at 2. Mm-hmm. So I feel that way because I feel that this Yui is essentially a final in this deck, because I'm, essentially cheating out an AP. And what I want is a volume of bodies compared to, trying to possibly, get an AP draw or anything, right? Because this one cannot search the top two instead. So I find that this is more effective in a way, right? So maybe you could increase the amount of finals if you feel that maybe, you're not seeing this Yui as much as you'd like, and you're not seeing as much of the value in it. Maybe you can create a more stable game plan where, you're leaning on the finals compared to leaning on the Yui.
Okay. Then that is fantastic. That wraps up our breakdown of the blue switch with Izarzin. Whether you're new to SAO decks or trying to level up your fundamentals, this is definitely one of the most explosive and rewarding builds to master. I'm very excited to see how many people are going to be adapting to this deck in the new meta, where aggro is going to begin to shine wondrously. Big thanks to Izarzin. Big shout out to Big Beard Pirates TCG, the channel that he belongs to. Thanks for sharing your insights and the gameplay breakdown itself. If you enjoyed this deck tech, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out other videos on this channel that we are doing, as well as other videos on both of our channels, which will be down in the description below. Have a wonderful day.